Welcome to Magical Books for Kids, a podcast sponsored by Magic Everywhere, Inc., a company based in Florida. Hosted by Michael John Sullivan, this is your place to hear the very best children's stories and an opportunity to get to know your favorite authors. Now, here is Michael John Sullivan.
Welcome to Magical Books for Kids. I'm Michael John Sullivan, and thank you for joining us for another podcast. This podcast and all our weekly podcasts are free on all platforms. You, of course, hear this every Wednesday. It is the first time that you can hear these particular podcasts. But of course, it's available for everybody. And as we said, it's free, and it's sponsored by Magic Everywhere, Inc., a company based in Kissimmee, Florida. We're honored to have children's author C.M. Healy. He lives with his wife, dog, and 2 giant cats, where he teaches high school chemistry. When he's not busy writing, he enjoys building Lego sets, playing video games, reading comic books, his favorite is The Flash, and watching TV with his best buddy, his wife. He earned the Distinguished Award of Eagle Scout during high school and went on to obtain his master's in child development from Oklahoma State University. He's been working with and entertaining children of all ages ever since, and he loves to wear fun socks to his events, so ask him if he decides to show up at these particular events. C.M. Healy, thank you for joining us here on Magical Books for Kids.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
Well, first of all, let's talk about, were there any childhood authors that inspired you to write? I mean, we all had certainly our favorite books, our favorite authors. I was more of a sports person. I read every kind of sports book I could get my hands on. Everything. I wasn't too much interested in anything else but sports. And as I grew older, my diversity of reading books changed somewhat. So who inspired you to become the author you are today?
Probably my biggest influence is Shel Silverstein, which for your listeners, if you haven't heard of him, I'm sure you have. He did The Giving Tree, Where the Sidewalk Ends. He wrote songs for Johnny Cash, articles for different magazines. I mean, the guy was pretty eclectic as far as it goes. So if you haven't heard of him or read his stuff, go check him out. Quirky little poems, short weeds, all kinds of stuff like that. I actually have a book, The Other Side, that is dedicated to him for influencing my work and how my brain thinks and just all these little quirky things and ideas that pop into my head. But yeah, it kind of looks like him. It was illustrated by an 8th grader. She's in college now, but when I was teaching middle school science, I came across her and paid her for her job, and she did a wonderful job. So he was probably my biggest influence. Obviously, like Dr. Seuss, others. I write a lot in rhyme, and it's almost hard for me to not rhyme. I don't know how that happens, but I've tried to do it, and it just doesn't work out. So.
How interesting that is, because I've spoken to many authors on this podcast, and a lot of them say rhyming is very hard for them because you have to have a certain mindset, obviously, and you don't want to just rhyme just to rhyme. You need to tell the story first.
Right. And not only that, like meter is very important. Like Shel Silverstein was very particular in his meter. When you read it, it flows like a river. It's not hard. It's not forced. And that's where I really, try to hang my hat and help others, is making sure that their stuff is good. I don't know. I'm kind of anal like that, I guess. It makes it good for the book and the reader and all that stuff. So
yeah, we all have our habits, right? I mean, that's something that we develop over the years. As you got older, and did your taste in books change, or was there any particular book as you went through high school that inspired you?
I got into comic books when I was in high school. I've read several books by Frank Peretti, who's a Christian author. One of my favorites is This Present Darkness and Piercing the Darkness. Stephen King, he's hit or miss with me, but I love how his mind works and kind of where he goes with that stuff. And of course, I've read J.K. Rowling and the Harry Potter series, Twilight. I kind of bounce all around. I'm big into sci-fi and horror and mystery and stuff like that. So so it kind of grew, but my brain still hasn't, as you read my bio, I still do Legos and video games when I can. I play with my 2-year-old daughter. It just keeps my mind young. So it's kind of interesting. And then of course, and I tackled one of my novels is called Beyond the After, and it's a series, and it's all about Snow White, Cinderella, and Sleeping Beauty just 20 years later about their teenage daughters. But I mean, the first book is about the size of the third Harry Potter book. It's 108,000 words. So it's nothing to scoff at. I was kind of impressed when I started doing the word comparison of my books to her books. I was like, wow, this is like a book. Like it's like a real book. So
Sure,
it was kind
I
of
think
surprising.
yeah. Once you start topping like 80,000, and then you get into the six-figure situation, then it's a novel at that point. I mean, we
Yeah.
all.
So
Yeah, so you do both. You do children's books and you do novels. So you one of
I
those.
do. Yeah. I have children's books that range all the way from early readers to my young adult novels. I'm working on a middle school kind of like Goosebumps type, horror mystery with kids. And then my wife and I are going to be working on a new children's series that helps with like problem solving and deductive reasoning and stuff like that. So yeah, I kind of, and then I've got my own horror ideas like Stephen King ideas that'll be for later, down the road and everything. So
Yeah, they never stop coming, do they? I mean, authors are always saying that they're always on to the next project, or they have
yeah,
project.
and you just don't have enough time. I mean, hopefully, like you said, I do teach my high school chemistry. I've got my daughter. Hopefully there's going to be a moment where I can stop teaching, generate enough income from the royalties of my books, do author visits to schools and stuff like that. I really enjoy doing those, and really focus more on the writing, the marketing. What a lot of people don't realize is when you become a children's author, like you're not just writing a kid's book, like you better be able to do the business side of this thing, or you're just going nowhere, because there's so many indie authors right now that are putting out really, really high level professional looking books. And it's a lot of competition. And if you don't get your name and your product out there in front of the audience, then what's it worth? What's the point? So
Yeah, I have these discussions all the time, and we've had a few authors that, if you give a mouse a cookie, if you give a pig a pancake, Laura Numeroff,
mhm.
she sold millions of books.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I've spoken to Disney writers as well, and they've sold their books as well too. But most of us, independent children's authors, we do have to promote and market, and we have to reach out. And as you said, there's 5 million others, and as you said, there's so many talented people out there, and illustrators. That the artwork that I see across the board is tremendous. So you're
Yeah.
right. There's so much competition out there.
The newest book that just came out for me here this last January, it's a sequel to Penelope Rose. This one's Penelope Rose Goes to India. I met the illustrator. He lives in Macedonia, so halfway around the world,
Oh,
you know. So the internet and social media has just made things immeasurably easier for people like me to actually do this, not only as a hobby, but as a viable income. Again, there's authors that are pulling in 6 figures a year just by selling their books. And I'm not going to say they're bad, but they're not better than some of the other, they're not the classic books that you would attach to, but they're good enough and they know the business side to where they're making it work for them. So yeah, I'm really happy with his name's Deshaun Pechchev. So I'll be having him work on. He's really good with animals. I guarantee you one of these days he's going to be drawing for Disney. I don't know when or how, but it's going to happen. And I told him when that happens, I was like, you just got to make sure you still work for me. I do want you to do my book still. I don't want to grab you and lose you to Disney. So
yeah, we've had two illustrators, well, many more, but two illustrators that work primarily with us. One was in Romania, and
oh
the other
wow.
one was in Cuba. And I can tell you both are qualified enough to draw for Disney. That they're so talented, and
Yeah, it's
like you
just
said,
amazing.
yeah, it's incredible the people that you run across because of the internet. Now, just to go back to one part of your bio, you said first of all you enjoy building Lego sets. Is there a particular, what would you say your biggest accomplishment? What was the biggest Lego set you built?
Okay, so I think to date, the one that I've actually built, I think, is the Ghostbusters Lego house.
Okay.
Now for Christmas, I got the 1989 Batmobile. Lego. And then for my birthday, I went ahead and got the Batwing because you got to do it. So
you're an
because with
aficionado.
Lego,
You know everything
yeah,
about
I'm an 80s fan. I grew up in the 80s. So all of that stuff. I have Star Wars, I have Harry Potter, I have a whole bunch of different ones, but those are the ones that I've acquired most recently. The problem is I don't have a place to display them once I built them. So there's still that, and the fact that these things do take time. The Ghostbusters, I think, ended up taking me, when I timed it, it was around 16 hours total. So I did it over a spring break. I just sat down, put on a movie, and just put these things together. But they're just a lot of fun. And there's another company, it's called Light My Brick, I think, that makes LED kits to put in some of these. So like the Ghostbusters house is one, the Batmobile is obviously one, but they have LED kits that you can put in, and they're not as expensive as the Lego sets themselves, but they're like $80 or $90. So they're up there. But I mean, but you get to trick out your Legos to make them look really cool. So
where do you store your Lego sets? You have them, put them in the garage, or
well, I had a lot of them are still just in the box. I haven't had a chance to put up the Star Wars, because usually with the Star Wars ones, I'll get the fishing line and tack them up into my ceiling, so it looks like they're having a little dogfight out in space and stuff like that. I have that, the Millennium Falcon, the Imperial ship. So I have all those. And then, the boxes right now are just on display in my man cave at my house. I have so many things. I have the comic books, and I have old toys that are worth stuff, but I won't ever sell them because I like them.
Were you collecting comic books as a young kid? I mean, it seems to be.
Yeah, and I actually still do. I got to the point where, my guy in Stillwater, Oklahoma, the guy I started with when I was at Oklahoma State, he just sends me comics. Like, he just, every 3 or 4 months, he'll just mail me comics. And it got to the point where I'm literally 2.5, maybe 3 years behind. I just haven't had the time to read and stick up with them. So I told him, I was like, hey, I don't want to just dump on you, but let's start back collecting, because Flash is my favorite comic book. Wally West, in the 80s and 90s, when Mark Waid was writing him, he's definitely my favorite, hands down. But I wanted to start collecting some of the old Barry Allen comics, going way back in the day. They're going to get expensive someday, and that's when I'll have all my books will be making it, so it won't be a problem, hopefully. But yeah, so I still collect comics today. I still get I collect movie posters as well. Again, I'm kind of a big nerd. I've did the marching band and jazz band for 16 years. So all through it. Yeah, I'm just kind of a big kid when it comes down to it.
So what got you going, as far as what's your first book and what inspired you to write it? And tell us a little bit about the process of your first book. Every author has that first one that they went through and what they remember about it and everything. It's much like when I wrote my first novel, I self-published it and Simon & Schuster bought it. So obviously that doesn't happen to everybody. I always call fortune, good luck and everything. But what was your first book, and what inspired you, and what got you going writing the first book?
So I've been writing ever since the 6th grade. I never thought about being an author. I didn't go to school to be an author. I went to school to be with kids and be a child psychologist. And it wasn't until about 2010 where I got the idea for the Beyond the After book. Now, if you look at the copyright, you'll see that it didn't come out until 2015. So it was quite an expansive, gap in time. I would work on a little bit, and then I wouldn't, and I'd work on a little bit and I wouldn't. Anyways, but I finally got to the point where it's 2014, 2015, when I was teaching science, and I was like, you know what, I better get on this, because what was really weird is nobody had done this idea. Like, there's little stories out there that Disney has put out, like, Little Mermaid 2 and Cinderella 2 and 3, but nobody had actually carried on their family story. And, a lot of people were like, well, did you get Disney's permission to do this? And I'm like, well, they're actually public domain, because they're, the Grimm fairy tales and all that stuff.
That's right.
So you don't have to have that. Now, if Disney were to come to me and be like, hey, we want to make these into movies, sure, let's do this. But so I started to write on this, and it was all I did. So when I go to school visits, I tell the kids, I'm like, I stopped playing video games, because that was where a lot of my spare time was going, for 9 months. Like, while I was teaching school, I didn't have a kid yet or anything. So I really just focused. My wife was my editor, so we went back and forth. And I finally finished it in May of 2015. I got the ebook out there. And then I realized that a lot of people still want a hard, tangible book. And this is where Amazon and CreateSpace, if you remember when they were part of that, they've now since come to Kindle Direct Publishing.
Right.
But really helped me out with the print on demand. So, I did send my idea and my books to different agents and stuff like that. I didn't get a bite or anything. Nobody was even interested in the story, which I thought was really weird, because a lot of people, my reviews are really good. And when I talk to actual people that read it, they are very much, they love it, but nobody bit. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do this on my own because it's a thing. And I didn't know at the time, when if you self-published your book, that kind of turned the publishing world off of picking up your book, like, oh, you've already published it, well, we don't want to do anything
Right.
with it.
There's some of that thought process, but there's also the thought process, well, if it gets a good audience, then all of a sudden they want to be your pal.
Of course, right, exactly. Now they want a piece of your pie, which I'm like, yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, sure. I can name a bunch of books. I mean, look at The Shack, right? That was
exactly
self-published, and then all of a sudden everybody want to be part of it.
Right.
Lisa Genova's Still Alice. She was self-published, and then Simon & Schuster picked it up, and it became a movie as well.
Right. So that's basically kind of where it started. And on the offside, so while I was doing that, I can't draw to save my life. So I
can't either.
It's really, really bad. So my wife works in advertising. She had some graphic design friends, and I hired 3 of them to do 3 of my poems or children's stories that I had written. Just again, I would have been substitute teaching, and an idea pops in my head. So while I'm sitting out in the hall, or I'm not, really doing anything, I was productive with my time. And so they illustrated it. We got it all put together. Of course, tons of mistakes, lots of things learned, in the process of doing all of that. I'm still learning, obviously, but that's where it all started. So I got a few of them printed. And then for the summer, while I was going to visit all my friends and family and camp, I do volunteer at a camp in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. It's called Lutherhoma. But anyways, and I came back home. I knew a coffee shop owner in downtown Dallas. I said, hey, could I set up shop? I mean, he sold books and stuff like that in his coffee shop. So would you mind if one day I just sat outside your shop and did a book signing? And he's like, absolutely, please come. I even offered to pay him a percentage, and he said, no, don't worry about it. Just come and do it. And it was when strangers came by my table, it wasn't anything super professional, asked me what I was doing, told them who I was, and they're like, really? And they bought my books. And that was like, it was such a weird feeling, because everybody up until that point had either known me or friends and family. It wasn't just any Joe Schmo off the street coming by the coffee shop.
Right.
And they totally were into it. And I was like, okay, maybe I can do something with this. So, again, I'm still teaching and everything like that. I finally wrote the second book to be on the after. I got 3 more books illustrated, and then another one. And then it does. And then once I had my kid in COVID, and everybody was like, well, COVID, you must have just written all kinds of stuff and gotten really productive. I was like, if I hadn't had a daughter, yes. But having a 2-year-old is, and my wife was working from home. So who's going to watch the kid?
That's a challenge. Yes, especially. And that's something that it's new. It's new for all of us. I mean, like you said, you have a daughter to take care of. I was alone, so I actually got to my next novel during it.
Oh, nice.
And other authors, I think one author wrote like 5 books during the whole COVID thing. But you're right. But when you're dealing with a 2-year-old, your time is going to be of essence to the good.
Yeah, well, and it's one of those things where, the biggest thing that I have learned, I think, in this process, and I'm still trying to ingest this advice, is every author is at a different stage. I see my author friends who are like putting out 2 or 3 children's books. They're getting them illustrated like this and that, and they're just doing Kickstarters, and they're going. Now, some of them are just like Energizer bunnies. Like, they just there's no stop button on them. But they have grown kids. Their kids are in 3rd or 4th, 5th, 6th grade. So they don't have to keep an eye on them totally.
Right.
They're in a different stage in their life of where they can be more productive with this. I am not. I actually did this for my kids before I even knew I was going to have my daughter, so I wouldn't miss the recitals, so I wouldn't miss the sports events or whatever was going on, in her life.
Right.
I didn't want to have to say, no, I can't, daddy's got to work.
Right.
So I started this whole journey for her. She'll figure that out when she gets a little older. But yeah, so that's where it kind of came together. And, like you said, the ideas just don't stop. Like I could literally have 10 of me writing constantly, and it would happen until I died.
Right. I mean, and we
I
all
just,
have so many ideas, but not enough time and money. That's what it
oh
comes
yeah.
down to
Well,
as
and that,
well.
yeah. And that's the huge thing is, when you're doing the self-published thing, nobody realizes how expensive it is. It is really, especially, and it depends on your illustrators, like my guys in Macedonia. So the American dollar goes a lot farther there than it does here. That would be another thing. If any authors that are listening, any kids book authors, outsource. I love America. I love keeping. All my books are printed in America. Like I don't begrudge anybody that prints in China, but for me personally, I'm trying to build our economy and keep all the money here. Yeah, so that's my only outsource.
I agree. I agree. It's the same thing. We printed 10,000 books of our Lizard Who Loves a Blizzard book, and it was done here in the U.S. So,
Awesome.
yeah, I think that's what we all should be doing at this point. But as you said, illustrators come from everywhere.
Yeah, they really do.
Yeah,
and with the internet,
yeah,
you can connect and they send you pictures and you're like, this is, and Zoom now, like you can literally have a face-to-face conversation basically with your illustrator. So it's great technology. We weren't here 10 years ago. It's amazing at what's changed in the last 10 years for printing options. Just there's Upwork, so you can pay people legitly across the Great Pond. It's amazing. I got into it at the right time. There's things I would have done differently, but I'm happy. I have 10 published books, for crying out loud. Some of them do better than others, but yeah, it's just
10
amazing.
books is very prolific for a guy that is teaching high school chemistry and has a 2-year-old. That's very prolific. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. If I had more money, I would be writing children's books faster because those really don't take me that much time. Like I could easily turn around a kid's book. Let's just be, really egregious and say a week. I could turn around a kid's books in a week. Polishing aside and all that stuff.
Right.
It's really just paying the illustrators to get the job done because they do take more than a week to illustrate books.
Yeah, it's a little different than writing a novel. Novel is a marathon.
Oh yeah.
A children's book. There is some stuff with design and everything like that you have to go through, and you got to pay a designer if you want the book to bleed, like with pictures to bleed with the words and everything like that. So there's all sorts of things. But 10 books is terrific. So
yeah, thanks. Like I said, I'm hoping to have the middle grade book out this fall, but of course I have to write it still. So, I've started it, but it's way smaller. I started doing word counts just to give my brain an idea. And most of R.L. Stein's Goosebump books are anywhere between, 24 to 27,000 words. So you're looking at a quarter of what I've already accomplished. I'm like, I can do this. And it's not nearly as complicated and integrated as what my books are, because the Beyond the After books, the first 3 books happen at the same time.
Right.
So literally, and people don't know that. So I've kind of had to like repolish and like put some more stuff on the back of the book so people understand, hey, yes, it's all about these 3 princesses, but each book is their own little story on that same time. And then the rest of the story is going to move forward with all 3 of them, and it'll go however long, wherever I want it to go. But the first 3 are very intricate in how I need to plan it. I printed off calendars, to keep track of the moon phases, where people are in which kingdom, and all of that stuff. It's I don't know how, like, J.K. Rowling and Martin and Tolkien did it. So many characters, so many places, so much going on.
They have a lot of fact checkers. They have a lot of people at the publishing company. There's a lot of people that go in and they check the facts and everything like that. Yeah, because they, as you said, J.K. Rowling with her, like all those characters. Remember too, J.K. Rowling was rejected by a lot of publishers.
Oh yeah, her and Stephen King, and I know Dr. Seuss, but all the greats, they say, hey.
Yeah, I mean, I know
it's going to happen. So
yeah, it's the Elf on the Shelf was rejected People didn't
right.
think that they didn't think it had any kind of commercial viability to it. And look at it now; it's like multi-million-dollar
Whoops.
organization. Yeah. So everybody, it's all subjective. That's the way I look at it. Reading is subjective as well. I may find something that's great that you may not find that's great, or vice versa. So where can people find your books?
So the best place for them and me, honestly, is authorcmhealy.com/order books. If you Google CM Healy, and everybody's, hard of it stands for coconut marshmallow. Not really, obviously, but the kids came up with that. They're like, what does CM stand for? I was like, I don't know. What do you think it stands for? Like coconut marshmallow. I was like, that's what it stands for. Everybody knows coconut. Everybody knows marshmallow.
Right.
Very easy to hear. But yeah, so Google CM Healy. My Instagram is author CM Healy. My Facebook page is CM Healy. Everything's CM Healy.
Yeah, you can Google it. I Googled your name, a few days ago to do research and everything, and your name popped up right away. I put CM Healy, and I said, I'm going to put writer in there just to be sure. And you popped up right away, and all your stuff was there and everything. You can find your books on Amazon and everything.
Yeah, they're all on Amazon. So if you do live outside the United States, so for those of you who, so the other thing I was going to say is if you order books directly from me, one that helps me the most financially because no one takes a piece of my pie except for me.
Yeah, Amazon takes half of it. People don't realize
they take a lot, and after the books are printed and everything, that's quite a bit. So so buy them from me. I sign the books. When you check out, it asks who do you want the book dedicated to. I actually take it one step further, and you get to choose the ink color. So all the way from red, blue, orange, purple, teal, all these different colors you can choose from if you want. And then of course I ship them out. I'm getting to the point where hopefully my books will be free Prime shipping. I'm doing that with this new one, Penelope Rose Goes to India, but I don't think it's quite, well, actually, no, I take that back. You can buy it right now. I just haven't advertised it yet. So go there. My email, authorcmhealy@gmail.com. It's all part of the branding of me. Some people.
Exactly. Well, we have to be our marketers and promoters.
Right. And, and I've had several authors, they rebrand their Facebook to different niches that they're covering, not sensory. I'm trying to think of what the word is. But anyways, so they have their own little niche. And I'm like, I don't have that. I have children's books from early readers on up. I have poetry collections. I have my young adult novels. I have my middle school that's going to come out. I have my other kids book that's going to come out. So I really want people to know me and attach my name to something great. And when they see CM Healy's coming out with a new book, let's check it out. Maybe for them, may not be for them. It just depends. Like when I come out with my horror story, I'm not going to change my name. I thought about it really hard of whether I wanted to change my.
No, don't change your name.
Yeah, no. And, and it's come down
to remember. That's the thing. Your name is easy to remember.
Right. So I'll probably change the font so that people, when they see my name in like the chiller font or something, that looks scary, they'll know like, hey, this is not for kids. Right. Something along those lines. But
sure.
But yeah, I'm super excited to keep moving forward and writing these books and to work again with Deshaun and have him do my next kids book. It's just, it's a lot. There's a lot to it. And I try not to get overwhelmed. I got to prioritize and get one ball rolling before I start the next ball rolling and all that stuff. But it's been great.
Yeah, exactly. Because we're working on so many different projects. We have to focus and get the nearest one done first before you start working on the others. But it's hard because your mind goes in all different directions. I know mine does. So.
Yeah, well, and even when I started, there was, all the social media. It's like, well, this is why Pinterest is great. This is why Facebook is great. This is why Twitter. This is why Tumblr. This is why Instagram. This is why blah, 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 blah. And I was like, I had to step back and I was like, I'm going to focus on one. And that's Instagram because I can do both that and Facebook at the same time.
Right.
Cuts my time in half. And then everything else can just kind of fall under an umbrella. And if I need it, I have it, like I have a LinkedIn account and stuff like that. I really don't keep up with it that much. But yeah, there's that. And then everybody under the sun is trying to get you to do their next thing. They'll do a free webinar for you and it's like 2 hours when they really could have just made a half an hour. And it's like, you can just make $100 grand a year just by doing this. I'm like, but you're writing books for other people. Like, you're not writing them for you. Like, you're not going to get the royalties. Like, I'm trying to build like an empire,
Right.
Like, I'm trying to build my foundation so I can just keep collecting on these books for the rest of my life. And yeah, but to each their own. Everybody has their niche. Everybody has something that they're good at and that they enjoy doing. I enjoy doing it all.
Which is great. So if you're going to catch up with CM Healy, Google him, CM Healy. CM Healy. Thank you so much for joining us here on Magical Books for Kids. I appreciate your time.
Of course, it was my pleasure. I'd love to be back.
Definitely. We'll have to have you back around Christmas time. That's what I'm telling all our authors as we go through our first round of authors.
Right.
So
yeah. Christmas is the big selling.
Exactly. So thank you again for joining us here at Magical Books for Kids. I'm Michael John Sullivan. Join us next week for another edition of Magical Books for Kids, sponsored by Magic Everywhere Inc., a company based in Kissimmee, Florida.
Thank you for listening to Magical Books for Kids, a podcast sponsored by Magic Everywhere Inc., a company based in Florida. Hosted by Michael John Sullivan. This is your place to hear the very best children's stories and an opportunity to get to know your favorite authors. Join us for another fun storytelling podcast next week.